Alright, this morning we are at Cradle Mountain National Park, about to take off on our Overland Track hike for the very next week, all the way through to Lake St. Clair. I'm here with both my parents, which is very exciting. It's something that has been on our bucket list, I suppose, for all of us for about the last year now. We've been talking about. Unfortunately, however, the weather is looking absolutely terrible out there. So we're about to go jump into it and take you all with us.
We're ready.
All right, off we go.
If you're not familiar with the Overland Track, let me quickly fill you in and give you a bit of an idea why it's right up there on the Australian hiking bucket list. First of all, this stunning walk takes place right in the heart of the Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Area, running from the top to the bottom of the famous Cradle Mountain, Lake St. Clair National Park, and giving hikers the opportunity to see remote landscapes that simply aren't accessible any other way. It includes Mount Ossa, Tasmania's highest mountain, Lake St. Clair, Australia's deepest lake, and of course countless other waterfalls, walks, mountains, huts, and unique natural rock formations and landscapes to explore. Secondly, the track through the summer hiking season is capped to a maximum of just 34 individual walkers per day, meaning whilst it is Tasmania's most famous walk and incredibly popular, it still allows hikers to enjoy the natural environment without overcrowding or losing a sense of being in the wilderness environment you came to see. The walk takes on average around 6 days or a week to complete, and runs either 65 kilometres from Ronny Creek to the Narcissus Ferry, or 80 kilometres through to Cynthia Bay if you choose to complete the full hike around Lake St. Clair. So with that said, here's how we chose to complete our week on the Overland Track. Starting the day beforehand, we caught a shuttle bus from Lake St. Clair up to Cradle Mountain to begin the walk. If you are thinking of completing the track yourself, it is important to note that it can only be walked north to south, not as a loop, so transport of some sort ideally needs to be pre-arranged from either end. We personally just chose to give ourselves more time flexibility by walking back to our vehicle. Here we stayed the night at Cradle Mountain. This is me checking the forecast for the disastrous weather we had ahead of us. Again, if you're on a tighter timeline, you could certainly start your walk this day, but we just used it as an opportunity to get ready and then sign into the walk and safety briefing to actually get our track passes. Day one, as predicted, did start off super duper rainy, so we headed straight to the visitor centre and did a little bit of a pack weigh-in for anyone curious what sort of weight we were actually carrying.
Headed to the visitor centre.
Alright, Mum's pack weigh-in.
16.5.
Oh, she's a heavyweight.
Here comes Dad.
8.
I expected heavier.
Laura's weighing.
That's heavier than I'd like.
Too heavy. 16.5.
Alright, headed off to the buses now. Already feeling heavier than we would have liked, we caught the park shuttle to Ronny Creek and signed ourselves in to finally start off our walk. This first day runs 10.7 kilometres from Ronny Creek to Waterfall Valley, with an optional stop at Kitchen Hut and a 2-kilometre side track to the Cradle Mountain summit. It begins on boardwalk over button grass plains, onto a gradual ascent, and for us, unfortunately, barely lasted a few hundred metres without getting rained on, which was certainly a sign of what was to come. If nothing else, the rain did make for some beautiful flowing waterfalls skirting the track up to Crater Lake and the boat shed overlooking the landscape above. Now, this is where the weather starts to get really wild. How strong's the wind? You gonna get wind was absolutely rushing up over Crater Lake, so much so that a gust could throw you off balance just standing on the open track. Not to mention the freezing conditions it brought with it, as you can probably imagine from the unseasonable summer snow around us at just over 1,000 metres elevation.
We've just arrived off the Marion. Our view today, I think it all like 2 weeks ago when we were here, no view at all, to be honest with you, just a complete whiteout, and the winds are going crazy at this point. But we made it up, so we're headed off from here to Kitchen Hut now. Oh, go Laura!
It's a little hard just by sharing this to explain really how freezing cold and windy it was up on this exposed mountain landscape, but to give you an idea, the Bureau of Meteorology issued both an extreme weather warning and bushwalkers warning for Cradle Mountain to receive strong 100-kilometre-an-hour wind gusts, rain, hail and snow, causing low visibility and freezing temperatures for the entirety of our first day. National Parks, in response, offered us a complete refund of our track pass if we decided to cancel or turn back, a fee that is normally completely non-refundable. We found out later of the 34 odd walkers on our start date, 11 either turned back or chose not to start entirely, despite all the organisation and transport gone into getting there and having to have booked months in advance. Halfway into the first day is Kitchen Hut, a beautiful small alpine hut and emergency shelter for walkers, which in our blizzard conditions was a very welcome stop off the trail. Unfortunately, with everyone else also sheltering here, I did have someone mistakenly take my gloves and also managed to leave with both a ripped raincoat and ripped rain pants after getting them stuck under someone else's pack. Certainly a very necessary and normally peaceful stop off, but in this case the start to a very beautiful but also cold and wet rest of the day for us. Kitchen Hut in calmer conditions is also where you would turn off to hike the Cradle Mountain summit. Again, for us it was a total whiteout this trip, so if you would like to check that hike out, I'll pop a link to it on the screen now for you. The track continues through open flats and past some incredible alpine vegetation that, despite the cold and literal hail at this point, we were incredibly lucky and excited to be experiencing under snow at this time of the year.
That beautiful mountain behind you, Dad. You can just see it up there. That's pretty spectacular, actually.
It is, isn't it? So spectacular.
And pretty cold.
It is a bit cold.
Showing just how bad the weather can get, this small green dome is an emergency hikers shelter that we again found out later 2 hikers from our start group did actually end up spending the night in after getting disoriented off the track. The end of this first day drops you down to the stunning Waterfall Valley Hut, a newly rebuilt hiker's hut, complete with bunks, an open heated kitchen area, and huge glass windows showcasing the snowy mountains and valleys outside. After spending personally a lot of time last year exploring Victoria's high country huts, these hikers' cabins, I have to say, were absolutely unreal and not like anything I'd ever personally stayed in whilst out hiking. Providing much more of a tiny home experience than camping, I truly was grateful, but felt it was cheating a little not to have to pull out the tent at the end of the day.
Ready to go again?
We're ready.
Good morning, Laura.
Alright, day 2, let's go.
Day 2 is the shortest of the track and runs just 7.8 kilometres from Waterfall Valley to Lake Windermere Hut. It was incredibly wet and again freezing on trail, but at least now, still sitting at around 1,000 metres elevation, the snow and hail had been replaced simply by rain and a little bit of equally wet wildlife.
Oh, poor guy's so wet.
Compared to the first day, which is often, even in fine weather, referred to as the hardest for its steep elevation gain, this section of track is a relatively flat trip through heathland, over boardwalk, and past alpine gums as you skirt the rim of the Waterfall Valley circuit. Day 2 offers either the option to turn back to Barn Bluff or veer off to Lake Will, neither of which we did with the real lack of visibility. We did instead make the most of the boardwalk, eat lunch in the rain on trail, and pass by the beautiful Lake Windermere to camp on its edge at Windermere Hut. Similarly to Waterfall Valley, this hut is very new and just stunning to end a cold, wet day. Again, this is the camp kitchen area. We had homemade dehydrated meals, to which you could simply add boiling water, avoiding too much extra cooking on trail. And here's me fixing my wet weather gear, finally, for the hike ahead. Setting off for day 3, the weather was a lot kinder, with the fog clearing and mountain views finally in store. Heading from Windermere, the 16.8 kilometres out to Pelion Hut is certainly one of the longer, more winding days, constantly climbing and then dropping again in elevation. It was a real mix of vegetation from low alpine scrub to buttongrass plains and forested hills. Today's offshoot was the Forth Valley Lookout, a very quick sidetrack that you're seeing here. Unfortunately, still remaining super foggy, but this does at least give you an idea of the surrounding valley. The track continues after the rain through a whole lot of water and mud. We personally chose to wear boots, which at least while wet managed to keep your feet warm, unlike joggers or a mesh shoe. Continuing on through the forest, the sheer amount of moss and lichens in itself I think is a great indicator of just how cool and damp this climate stays, particularly compared to our more tropical, warmer weather patterns at home in northern New South Wales.
Oh, it's where the paddy melons live.
We walked through towering Pendennis, the world's tallest heath found only in Tasmania, and came out, as promised, to the lifting buttongrass field views of Mount Pelion West, the distant Mount Ossa ahead, as well as crossing the Forth River at an elevation of 730 metres above sea level, the lowest point on the Overland Track. Despite being quite a nice day with clearing weather and quite a lot of country to see, I would say it was probably my least favourite, just because it was a little longer and more repetitive than the days coming, and not quite as exciting as the snow of the first. Day 4 kicks off from Pelion Hut to Kia Ora, a simple 8.6 kilometre day with optional side trips to either Mount Ossa or Mount Pelion East summits from the halfway point at Pelion Gap. The morning starts with a small waterfall, then steep continuous climb almost 300 metres up to Pelion Gap over roots, rocks and boardwalk. Originally planning the trip, we had wanted to do as many side trips as possible, but with the previous weather simply not allowing for it, I really wanted to make the most of this clear day and headed off on a solo trip to the summit of Mount Ossa, Tassie's highest mountain peak at 1,617 metres. The track here is absolutely beautiful, winding around Mount Doris to reach Ossa, and infinitely easier without a heavy pack on the way there. Quickly gaining the extra elevation, there was a fair few patches of snow left on the mountain, mostly hidden in the shade of the rocky climb to the summit. Much like the track up Cradle Mountain, this is a steep, rocky climb, not a walk, and one you'll certainly need your hands free to complete an easy scramble up. That said, I do believe this, despite technically being higher, was a lot easier than our previous Cradle Mountain climb. The view from the top, while still in cloud, did temporarily clear to a beautiful open lookout and was well worth the climb for the view over the surrounding peaks and valleys below. As if it couldn't get any better, there are countless clear flowing mountain streams to fill up drinking water from here, and an easy 4 kilometres downhill stint to finish off the day.
Yeah, alright, here we are. What a view.
Day 5, now over 40 kilometres into the trail, moves from mountains into waterfalls with a real focus on exploring rainforest and the Mersey River that travels through it. The weather, still cold, was beautiful, but honestly a little hard to leave the stunning Kia Ora hut with its new design and open mountain views, making it possibly our favourite of the cabins on the Overland. In contrast to the little bit of luxury we had camping in huts, today's hike ventures past the historic Duquesne hut, the oldest hut in the park. Standing strong, this reminds me much more of the huts in the Victorian high country and remains a window into the way the area has been explored and developed with both tourism and time. Now for the waterfalls. There are 3 major falls on this section: Dalton, Ferguson and Hartlett Falls. Our first and I think most impressive being Dalton, followed by Ferguson, and the longer track to the top, and then base of Hartlett Falls. A perfect swimming spot had it been a whole lot warmer. Without a swim, the day then finishes downhill between a tangle of tree root steps and boardwalk to the Bert Nichols hut at Windy Ridge. Day 6, now very near to ending our overland journey, took us a further 15 kilometres from Windy Ridge to Echo Point on Lake St Clair via Narcissus Hut and Ferry Terminal. Walking on a bush trail, there are without a doubt any number of sticks, roots and stones to trip you up, but from this point no more major uphill sections, which is certainly a win for us. There is the option here to expand your walk, veering off the overland into Pine Valley to tackle the Labyrinth or Acropolis on further days. Certainly something I would like to return to do in future with more time. Continuing towards Narcissus, Buttongrass Plains give way to stunning views of Mount Olympus with some of the clearest, warmest weather of the trip. Before reaching the highlight of this track section, an exciting little suspension bridge, the only one on the overland track, hung above the Narcissus River. The area being so close to Lake St Clair is popular with day walkers and becomes accessible essentially to anyone with a National Parks pass again. It is quite a peaceful and lovely stretch of river, finishing at Narcissus Hut, from where many walkers choose to finish their hike on the overland track and catch the ferry back across the lake to the Lake St Clair Visitors Centre. I do think with time restraints this would be a great option. However, having the opportunity, we felt our experience on the overland should be completed fully with a walk around the lake, not just on a boat trip across it. For day 6, this meant another 6-kilometre hike through to Echo Point Hut, and really quite a beautiful stretch of incredible old growth timber forest, unique to what we had already seen on the track. It also meant the time to finally set up our tents and make the most of waterfront camping right on the edge of Lake St. Clair. Day 7, our final day on the track, greeted us with the most incredible mountain sunrise over the lake. The colours on the water were just unreal, and whilst I'm not a morning person, this one really was worth being out and getting up for. The hut itself was less exceptional, but a nice marker to leave from, walking the remainder of the track around the lake. The Overland Track from start to finish is made up of around 60% natural surface, like rock or dirt, and 40% boardwalk, corkboard or pathway. This final section, despite only being around 12 kilometres, was almost 100% roots and rocks. With so much vegetation to step over, around, or even duck under, I can see why so many at this point choose to take the ferry. Back on the water, we found a beautiful spot for coffee. Before venturing across to Watersmeet and around Cynthia Bay along the Lakeshore Walk to finish finally where we had left from a week earlier at the Lake St. Clair Visitor Centre.
Hey! Done it!
Wild weather and all, I feel our time on the Overland Track was such a wonderful experience to have had, and one I am so grateful and proud to have been able to share with family. A special thank you as well to everyone we met and shared this time with on the track, to my dad for teaching me so much of what I know today about hiking and being outdoors, and particularly to my mum for putting so much energy and enthusiasm into planning this trip, not only as an awesome way to tick off a milestone birthday, but also incredibly as her first ever overnight hike, leaving absolutely no excuses for anyone else thinking of getting out there. I hope you've enjoyed this overland journey with us, and I look forward to sharing with you all again soon.
My aftermath.